Today's episode is brought to you by Positively Productive Systems, whose mission is to be the antidote to your stress and to provide compassionate productivity resources and coaching that help you heal and achieve. Be sure to check out both free and paid resources at positivelyproductive.com/resources.
When you're caring for other human beings, there's a lot of information that you have to carry around in your head at all times because you have to have an intimate knowledge of what those human beings need, whether it's your children or your husband or your parent who's elderly and you're taking care of them. It's just really all those mental tasks that have to be checked off in a day. And sometimes, as the default parent, it doesn't matter what time of day, I might have to recall that information and then set a timer to be able to go do the thing that I have to do to take care of someone else in my household or to run the household. So it's just the unseen tasks that we carry around with us each day.
You're listening to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zaratny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a coach certified in time and stress management, helping overwhelmed clients make space for what matters. Join me each episode as we explore ways to live a more proactive, productive life with topics and guests that speak to simplifying self-awareness, systems, and so much more. I understand overwhelm personally as a fellow multi-passionate entrepreneur, wife and mom to kids and cats, and former caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Welcome to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, and today we're talking about the mental load of parents and caregivers. The mental load is the behind-the-scenes work necessary to manage our lives and properly care for others. You may have heard this topic in the context of moms. That's because there is an imbalance, with moms more often than not being the default parent or the one who takes on the mental load of the family, and as such, deals with the stressors of those demands. I can attest to that stress as I lived it myself as a mom and a caregiver at the same time. In this conversation, though, we aren't pointing fingers or limiting the discussion. The mental load can hit everyone in different ways, and my guest and I cover a variety of those. To dig into this topic with me, I invited Roxanne Ferber, who joined me as a coaching guest on episode 51, a strategy call episode about balancing family and business. Roxanne, also known as the Whatever Mom, has been a stay-at-home mom, work-from-home mom, and is now a work-outside-the-home mom. She's discovered that motherhood in any form is not easy. And while in the lonely phase of raising twin toddlers, Roxanne created an online village for moms who need to know it's okay to do whatever works for their own families and for their own sanity without feeling guilty. Roxanne definitely brings that attitude of whatever works for you to this conversation, and I'm here for it. Roxanne and I suggest a number of ways you can reduce your mental load, but one in particular stands out: communication. You'll want to listen for her advice on that specifically and how it relates to the other suggestions. I welcome you to listen in, note where you are with this challenge and what resonates, and then try one of the tips to reduce your mental load. One of the first things Roxanne said when we began to talk was that the mental load is the information you carry around. And that set off a bunch of bells and whistles to me, because you know what that really boils down to? Mental clutter. We've talked about this so many times before. And one of the simplest practices to reduce that is a mind sweep, sometimes called a brain dump. It's something I do with all my clients, and I created a worksheet called the Focus File to help with that. So I encourage you to try it. You can access this worksheet for free by requesting the Multi-Passionate Toolkit, which includes this worksheet and quite a few others that I use with my clients. You can go to the Positively Productive website, positivelyproductive.com, and request it there. Now let's join Roxanne and talk about ways we can reduce the mental load. Welcome, Roxanne Ferber, to the Positively Living Podcast, or should I technically say welcome back, because you have joined us before, and I'm so delighted you're joining us again.
Thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate it.
So this was one of those topics that I was like, I know exactly who I want to chat with about this. And before we dig into the topic du jour, would you please tell us a bit about who you are, who you help, what you do, and what makes you light up?
Okay, well, my name is Roxanne and I write a blog called The Whatever Mom. I've been writing for about 7 or 8 years, just sharing my experiences as a twin mom and just all the crazy things that happen. And the highlight of all of that is that I've met a lot of really fantastic parents and moms who have been able to support, and finding out that many of us have a lot of online support because our villages, like in real life, are a little bit smaller. So being able to provide that kind of support has been fantastic. And what really lights me up is that's a good question because I'm still searching a lot of the time what it is, but it's like in the moment I connect with something creative that I'm doing. Either it's an art project with the kids or some big project I have going on at work. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like based on what I've witnessed from you over the years, and I'm delighted to have been connected for as long as we have been now, that, yeah, creative endeavors are definitely something that lights you up and things that help others. And your Whatever Mom blog is absolutely one of those. And I will never forget I guess it was one of the OG things that you created was that photography, I'm trying to think that it was like a display with
Uh-huh.
moms holding up
Yes.
signs. That's what I'm trying to say,
That
right?
was my original project. Yeah.
Yes, and I loved that. And essentially the gist of it here, but please go take a look. Please go to the Whatever Mom blog and go take a look. But it was, listen, your mom's, okay, fine. You breastfed, you bottle fed, you co-sleep, you sleep train, whatever. And that's the whole point of whatever. So with that in mind, we love to keep that attitude here. You do you. And that's one of the things we definitely want to take away from today is that you have to do you. You have to decide what your threshold is, what your levels are. But it's so important that we talk about something else that moms very much experience, but not just moms. We'll get into that. And that's the mental load. So the mental
Hmm.
load for parents, for caregivers. Let's start with what that is.
Well, I think the mental load is when you're caring for other human beings, there's a lot of information that you have to carry around in your head at all times because you have to have an intimate knowledge of what those human beings need, whether it's your children or your husband or your parent who's elderly and you're taking care of them. It's just really all those mental tasks that have to be checked off in a day. And sometimes, as the default parent, I carry a lot of that around with me. It doesn't matter what time of day, I might have to recall that information and then set a timer to be able to go do the thing that I have to do to take care of someone else in my household or to run the household. So it's just the unseen tasks that we carry around with us each day.
And I think the fact that they're unseen, it's like having a chronic illness that isn't obvious to people, right?
Hmm.
I'm comparing those very carefully, but I'm using that as an example of how frustrating that can be when you have something that, demands of you and others don't see it. Well, in this case, it's not that you have something that's tangible or a collection of things in front of you. It's the stuff in your brain. So I talk about mental clutter all the time on the podcast, right? It is very much mental clutter. And the minute you said information that you carry around with you, that like jumped out at me because I'm constantly talking about ways that we don't have to carry something around. Moms have it, dads have it too. You mentioned something before we started recording, and I like the term the default parent or the default caregiver.
Yeah, it's, whoever ends up being the one to do all the labor and the tasks and carrying out all of the details of the day and caretaking role. And oftentimes that can be the mom in the family or in the household, especially if that mom tends to be a stay-at-home mom, which I was for a number of years. And the amount of information that I had to just know and carry around and plan for and just know the agenda of the day every single day, and it could be a solo parent or a single parent even because they don't have anybody else to like be their backup storage for that information. They have to recall it all on their own. So I think a lot of times there's like kind of this uneven amount of carrying going on. One partner might carry a little bit more than the other, or one person might not have a partner to help carry that load. And it does get kind of heavy and overwhelming at times, especially when you think you're on top of things and suddenly you forgot a deadline or a paperwork that was supposed to be back to school and you're like, oops. I know there's a lot of single parents who are also taking care of their elderly parents. And so they have like this extra stuff to care for, especially if their parents have any kind of medical issues. They now have to carry on their birth dates and their social security numbers, their blood type, and whatever medications they're on. Like there's a whole list of information that they now have to possess and carry around for that particular family member. And when you have to recall all of that on top of how to do your job, what we're eating for dinner, it's really becomes like this never ending list running through your head. And when you mentioned a chronic, it's like a chronic illness, I was like, yeah, sometimes you're awake at 3 o'clock in the morning due to a symptom of your chronic illness. And it's the same thing with a mental overload is this you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to manage all of the things and panicking that you're going to forget something, you're going to drop a ball. So it can extend into almost a chronic experience as well. Sometimes it causes anxiety for people. Sometimes it causes headaches or some sort of physical, manifestation of all of that stress. So, we don't want to minimize people who go through chronic illness, but it's a chronic situation when you have the mental load and you're overwhelmed all the time.
That's right. And it is in fact when you have so much and depending upon your own limits, right? How much you're taking on and how you're able to juggle the demands and the information and what it is that you need to remember. And maybe depending upon the systems that you have, there is, going to be some level of stress response, some greater than others, depending upon your situation. And with that, yeah, there's absolutely going to be a connection to your physical response because your stress response is not just mental, but physical. I mean, it all plays together. And yeah, this can contribute to, oh my goodness, you mentioned headaches. It can actually contribute to memory gaps because overwhelm does play a part in that in limiting our focus. Because the more that we're trying to remember not to forget, then it's like a vicious cycle that you're in. You also mentioned being awake at night. So sleep deprivation, which then is like, speaking of a vicious cycle. And, spoiler alert, prioritizing sleep is like one of the top things that you can do to help with all of this. But it feels like it's so challenging. So with all this overwhelm, and I want to make a quick note, and it's something that you and I were very determined to do in this conversation, is we're not going to be laying blame today. But we do need to indicate that when it comes to default parenting, moms do experience this a
To
lot.
be the ones, yeah.
Yeah. That study is backing that up. And that is not to say that there aren't awesome dads out there contributing.
But we can also only speak from being moms, from that perspective of being moms ourselves and carrying
That's
that
right.
mental load. I don't know what it feels like to be a dad to carry that load.
Exactly. And I think that this is a conversation for everyone to keep having with each other so that we get on the same page and understand. And also for those who do feel like their mental load is extremely heavy, that there are opportunities to change things up.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, we've talked about what it might look like. You've given some great examples already. So you are managing the agenda of the day, the schedules, who's going where. We have medical appointments and medications as that might apply. There's what are we going to eat? Yeah, there's the paperwork you mentioned, like for school. Oh my gosh, when my kids come home from the beginning of the school year, I'm the one with the most homework.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, some of that in there, so just to kind of keep us with a certain perspective here, is that some of it is necessary and some of it is our own story that we're putting behind it and what we're doing. But also talking about like medical things, going to an appointment with your child or someone that you are caring for. And I've done this for my mom as well as my children. And then having to have that information so it could be like, what's happened since we last met? What's going on? What are you concerned with? What's, where's their progress? Answering all those questions. That's another case of mental load. It's like, it's the constant laundry list of things.
Yeah.
With that in mind, what can we do, Roxanne? How do you manage your mental load, for example, and what kinds of advice do you give? And I guess I should also ask, with all the mamas that you do connect with and support, what have you heard from them?
I think a lot of it comes down to we're always looking for that system that just clicks everything in place. And I will say, having been a stay-at-home mom, a work from home mom, and a work outside of the home mom, that sometimes the system changes and there isn't always a one size fits all system for every situation that you're in. But you find what works for you. And for me, I can't stop using pen and paper. It's like I have apps that I use, and I have apps that keep my husband and I connected with information, but I always have to come back to pen and paper because I happen to be a very visual person. So seeing it on paper is very, very helpful. So, a lot of organizing the different facets of what you have to manage. So mealtime could be a meal planning and prepping session, and school paperwork. I tend to come home every day from work and I open the kids' folders and immediately do the work. It's like a one-touch system. I see it, I do it, I put it back in the folder, and it's done, so that I don't get distracted and I don't forget to turn things in. So I think it's really finding something that works to keep yourself organized, whether it's externally in an app or externally on paper. Because I feel like once you try to keep it all up in here, as soon as a new bit of information comes in, something gets pushed out. So it's this constant juggle to try to hold it all inside. And so when I externally put it out there on paper, it's a huge help. Some of the things that have really helped me, and this is something I think is important to share when we're talking about, we're not blaming anybody, but sometimes I found for myself that I was kind of at fault for not delegating or feeling like I had to take on all of this because it's my job and it's my role to keep everything. And I noticed when I would get so overly stressed by that, it was helpful to tell my husband, I just need someone to do the dishes today because I have been on go all day long. I don't have anything left in the tank. I can't do the dishes tonight. And he'll be like, oh, okay, I can totally do that. That's fine. Or, I really could use help now that I'm back to work outside the home. I share our meal plan on the refrigerator. So if I'm not home in time to make dinner, he can just look it up and see what needs to be done instead of me having to delegate. So having a system in place that does the delegation for me without it being this back and forth conversation. Because I think sometimes what feels like the mental load is when we have to spend all the time explaining the step by step. And I'm like, I could have just done it. Could have just been done by now. So having those kind of systems that are like communication systems with your partner or the other person who needs this information is super helpful. And I think another thing I do is I set up on Sundays. I think I got that from you, where you look ahead for the week, see what's coming up. You know what I mean? And I can kind of be aware of what's coming up next. I think for me, that helps kind of stay on track with everything.
And that's just good advice for anyone who's living life. But may I say, the minute that you said system, I got all giddy and I jumped around in my seat a little. And I
Yeah.
swear to you, I did not pay Roxanne to say this. I swear. But thank you. Yes, system is so important. We're going to dig into that a little bit, but I want to back around to the perspective part of not that saying anyone's at fault or that you're at fault even, but that it's sort of taking responsibility sometimes for what you don't have to take responsibility for. It's like calling out who needs to do what. So to that point, first of all, I want to give a shout out to everyone out there that when you live in a household with other people, unless they are such small people that they are not capable of doing things for themselves yet, you don't have to say, help me, because it's not on you to do it.
Right.
You can say, we need to do this.
Yeah.
So how do we get this done? And I'm not saying it works perfectly. I still manage a lot in my house. Let's start with the perspective and thinking about what it is that your family wants. You talked about communication. A communication system is important. Communication to start with. Do you have chats with your family in terms of what you want to accomplish and how you want things to be?
I do actually. And at one point, we were doing it in a more formalized way because the kids have gotten to an age where they could help, but they didn't know what to do. And I was still kind of skill building and helping them learn some skills on how to take care of their laundry or clean their room or whatever needed to be done around the house. And so every Sunday night, we would sit down for like 15 or 20 minutes. And I'd have like a little mini agenda and we put out snacks. And then we would do something like board games at the end. So one kid got to pick out the board game. And then we would just go through like this quick agenda of like, here's what's coming up for the week. We have soccer practice. So you need to have your soccer cleats ready in the bag with your uniform, whatever they needed to do. And it was like a step by step. I'm going to be working late on Tuesday. So Keith, I'm going to need you to put the crock pot meal in for me. And then we kind of had this agreement just amongst ourselves, that these were the pieces of our little household community that we were going to take care of. I said what I needed, and then I felt heard and validated. And then my family felt like they were part of solutions instead of just sitting there waiting for the command to come. Like, now you must do the thing. It was just like, oh, I already know what the thing is. I'm going to go do that. So it was kind of an element of fun. And it wasn't just mom handing down all of the things you must do next.
Exactly. You're meeting as a team, and this
Hmm.
is something I constantly remind my kiddos is I'm like, this is not a you do this, I do this, or whatever. This is a we all live here and things need to get done. But the bottom line is having that communication so they know what's important to you, they know what needs to get done, they can figure that out too. Also, do you have anything in terms of like what we call in our house like specializations,
Okay.
where our kids are responsible for the cats? That's feeding, brushing, litter box, that sort of thing, right? They grew into that, but that's something that they do. Now, I still technically take care of, the supplies, if you will,
Right. Right.
but that's what they do. But yeah, there's certain areas or zones that we have. Have you done anything like that?
Yeah. My husband, even before we had children, we did what we call play to our strengths.
Hmm.
He hates mopping the floor. I don't mind it. So I will always mop the floor. I hate taking out the trash and scrubbing toilets. So he will always do those things. So as our kids get older, we kind of introduce them to those. They have the experience. They know how to do it because someday they're going to live in a home where they need to do those things too.
Yeah.
But it may not be their main chore all of the time, but we do try to rotate around. But, the kids take care of like the animals. We have a dog and a rabbit and they take turns. They alternate weeks. I think when you give them that like ownership of something, it really is a teaching element for them to understand the bigger picture of life. Like, oh yeah, it's fun to take care of a bunny and he's cute and he's fluffy, but when I have to really take care of this,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? Like I said, we play to our strengths. We just try to work with what works for us.
Exactly. Playing to your strengths. It's such a great way to put it. And that was actually something that my husband said to me because I wanted his perspective before we had this conversation and say, well, what do you think? And so we were having a laugh as we often do. And I was mentioning it's the movie The Breakup with Jennifer Aniston and Vince Vaughn. And
Hmm.
she's yelling at him and she's like, I want you to want to do the dishes. He's like, why would I want to do the dishes? So I'm going to say I don't agree with that.
Right, right,
there's things we're not going to want to do. It's called
right.
adulting. But as Jeff put it so well, he's like, it's like, yeah, I don't need you to want to do this thing, but I don't
Hmm.
want to have to be the one to do it all. That's how it works. And it's like, so we find ways it's division of labor,
Hmm.
essentially,
Hmm.
right? For the greater good of the family and playing to strengths and preferences. Okay. So let's get into those systems. One of the things I love that you keep saying, it's like you know the show, Roxanne. It's like you
Been here before.
she's not new, okay? Not your first positively living rodeo.
No.
Yes. What works for you? Yeah.
Hmm.
And if pen to paper is your best bet. But okay, so I have to give a shout out actually to one of my prior episodes on 3 systems that you need to organize your life. And the fact that a system itself, it's not the thing, it's not the platform, but it's how you're tracking what you're doing. And you mentioned something so important. So we're keeping organized, right? We're collecting information, but also a system to communicate. And one of the things I've discovered in coaching and also doing it with my own family is that things like a communication system where it's like, there's the information, go to it, something up on the fridge. And I write down the agenda. Well, actually, you should say really the most important elements of the agenda, the things that we really need to know. So the kids need to know their activities, what day of the school week it's going to be. People need to know when I'm recording my podcast so they're not, sending the marching
Knocking on the
band by
door.
the window and knocking on the door and suddenly need me, all that kind of stuff. And so it's the important stuff up there and it becomes less from me and more here's the structure of our days and the family rhythm and what we need to be doing.
Right. And I think one of the things that's important for me to what I had to recognize through all of this is when I would feel the most stressed about the mental load and I'd just kind of get resentful. I'm like, why don't you know these things? How would you know these things? It was just, I had to acknowledge that I didn't feel heard.
Mm.
And I had to think about, why don't I feel like heard? Why don't I feel like this message is received? And it was because I wasn't communicating it and I wasn't sitting down and sharing information. And so when my husband and I decided to have, I have little paper planner schedules and a meal planner on the fridge and stuff, but we have to have like a 15-minute conversation once a week. So it's a lot of like asking for what we need instead of holding on to it and expecting someone else to read our minds that they just should know. You're here, you live in the same house. How do you not know these things? Maybe they don't, because in my world, I'm just a doer and I get up and I do it. It's done. I don't think about it all the time. But then there are times where maybe I'm just not feeling well and I just don't want to do the thing. And I just would really love it if you could do the thing. So if my husband is already part of the rhythm and already knows what's going on, he can step into that a lot easier and not feel that resentment toward me for not telling him or sharing that information. So it just eliminates a lot of that hidden resentment that we might feel not getting our own needs met. And I don't know, I think that's been very helpful for us, is to make sure that we are talking to each other and telling each other what's going on. I think that actually could carry over to other parents. Maybe you're a solo parent and you have a co-parent, but you're not in the same households. That communication of what the children need so that you don't have to be the only one delivering it can be super helpful. It depends on the healthy dynamics of the relationship. But I think when you're co-parenting, it's essential to have some conversation or some system that maybe you don't have to literally talk to each other, but you can look on a calendar or you can send an email and just know what the other one needs. So
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that, because to that point was something I was going to add, and I've had success with it is, again, and this is a big part of what I coach when we're talking about, our preferences and our strengths and also our personalities. How do we work best? Some people are more visual than others. And I know that I'm in a sea of ADHD in this family. I know, I know, you know what I'm talking about.
yeah,
And also I have like, for example, my husband is a big techie guy. And I realized early on that I could be face to face with him and say something and he would acknowledge and nod and it would whoosh, go like so fast. It never happened.
right.
But if I say, "Hi, I need a moment of your time. Can you give me your attention?" Yes.
hmm
Would you like me to send this to you by text or email? Do you have a preference right now? Where do you want to search for it? And we figure that out. And then there are certain ways that we communicate about certain things. And we do it by technology. So, and again, that ties into the communication and the conversation you're talking about. It ties into the systems that we can potentially have. It can be easy to communicate, like Google Calendar, just for example. You can easily share that information. When I book something related to a family event on the calendar, and again, I'm the productivity coach and I do schedule a lot and I'm fine with that. I'm good at it. And it's not a problem based on our schedules. He has a lot of demand right now. I make my own demand, so it's my own darn fault. But I make sure that he is in that calendar event. So he has access to all the information he needs.
right.
There's map information. And that's one of my tips always, is that when you create an event on a calendar, go ahead and be detailed. Put information in there, put links to information that you need, and then, send invitations to people that may potentially support you in this.
Right.
Okay, same thing with the systems. Automating things can be a way. Reduce the mental load so that it's not another person potentially in your family or in your support system taking over, but it's really lifted off all of you because it's automated. There are things that supplies and things like that we have on subscription order, right?
Right.
There are ways. I mean, I have so much automated in terms of a calendar system and reminders and notifications that come up. And then when you do the weekly review, like you're talking about, you'll see that and it'll kind of click into your brain 1 week at a time, mind you. So important that we're not having too big a scope. That's awesome. I love that. So yes, scheduling things, automating them, and delegating in different ways. I think too, looking beyond our family. I don't know about you, but I've had some really incredible friends who have stepped in when I've been a little bit over my a lot over my limit, and asking them for help.
Absolutely. Yeah. And especially if you're part of any kind of organization, like for a while there, I had, we were attending a church and we had a church family. And shortly after I had given birth to the twins, they set up a meal train and they brought things for us. And, somebody would come and clean our house, and someone would and I think those should carry on all through our child, raising children, not just when the baby's first born. Because
Yes.
even when you have tweens and teens, and life just is so demanding and things need to be done. And I think in this day and age where our village is a little bit smaller, because it's more of, I feel like I have more of a digital village. You
Yes.
know what I mean? Like, I don't have somebody in my neighborhood. I don't have parents around the corner. So being available in those social groups or those organizations to ask for help or to be available to offer help is always a good thing too.
Absolutely. And again, along these lines, whether it's talking it out and getting that kind of support online or like in person, like I don't have a large group of people in person in
Hmm.
my area, but we have a few friends and they're very special to us. And when there are opportunities like to pick up two kids and drop one off instead, they're just small little things. But I know as a mama who was a caregiver and had little ones and didn't have family around us and had to rely on some friends, how incredibly powerful those little moments of help can be. They're not little.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I remember one time I was really, really sick and I had two little babies and I couldn't get to the store. And thankfully, Facebook is a magical land. Sometimes you post things and you're like, I'm not feeling good. I don't know how I'm going to get to the store. My girlfriend knocked on the door. I opened up and there was a care package of Kleenex and soup and all the things I needed for me to take care of myself. Right. And I think we're talking about systems and automating things. Self-care plays into that in some ways. When you can set aside this X amount of time every Friday night, even 15, 20 minutes, just to unwind from that mental load, put it down for 15, 20 minutes, just disconnect from it and connect to yourself. It can really help you carry forward the next day and the day after that.
Absolutely. And I mean, we do need to wrap up this conversation for today, but the fact that you said the word self-care, and there's a ton of wonderful episodes you can go back and listen to support the idea of self-care and what it really is. But the bottom line is keep that perspective, keep asking for help. I know it can be so challenging because you feel like sometimes it can be, questioning your strength and your ability. Nope. Nope, nope, nope. The fact that you're carrying this mental load means you're like Hercules. Okay. So ask for the help and be willing to let it be however it's going to be. Because sometimes it's not going to be what you expected, but it's okay. And find the ways to say no or to take it off your plate. I think all of those are great
And
suggestions.
lower those standards a little bit if you have to just do whatever works to keep the most amount of sanity in your day.
Yes. Yes. It all comes down to sanity. Okay. Any other thoughts to encourage us when we've got that mental load on us?
My go-to is just breathe. Just take a moment, take a deep breath, and kind of let the heaviness go, because it all works out in some way. It always does. And if it doesn't work out today or tomorrow, it will in the short term work itself out and you're going to be okay.
I love that. Okay, now before we get into our fun little rapid wrap up, please tell us again where we can find you, whatever mom.
It's at whatevermom.com is my website. I'm on Facebook as the Whatever Mom and Instagram, and obviously on this podcast. There's this episode and one before. So, yeah.
We'll definitely link to all of that in the show notes. Okay, Roxanne, let's go into the rapid wrap up. Just fill in the blanks for me. A
Okay.
song that lifts my spirits, makes me dance.
Oh, you know what's on my playlist right now is, I think her name is L or Ellie King. She has got me just jamming out in the car to America's Sweetheart, I think it's called. Oh my God, such a powerful jam. And it just got to crank it. It's great.
All right. We'll add that to the Positively Living Podcast Spotify playlist. I think we're still on volume 3. Okay.
Great.
How about a quote or a mantra that inspires me that I love to share?
Today I will choose joy. Just reminds me to keep perspective of where I am.
That's a big word for our conversation today, that's for sure. Okay. And how about a resource? It could be a book or an app, anything really that's made my life better.
So many things. I think Google has made my life so much better with the calendars and the apps that I can use inside of it to schedule things.
That is a fantastic answer. I agree 100% because without my Google Calendar, I don't know where I'd be.
Yeah.
Okay. And last, but certainly not least, what are you grateful for today, Roxanne?
I am just so grateful to be able to be here and talk about this because it's not talked about enough. And I'm hoping that it inspires someone else to feel like they can carry this mental load and they'll make it.
I love that. Well, I am so grateful for you. All the time that we
Aw.
have connected and chatted, the trust you've placed in me, the wisdom you're sharing today, and just how brightly you shine your light in this world. And hey, you came to share it with us again today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate that.
Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious and limited, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback, questions, or want to schedule a chat, head to positivelyproductive.com/connect. And if you are looking for any of the resources referenced on the podcast, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.